We'll sit here and we're going to talk, okay? Just come to the table and talk. My name's John. I'm your friend. I'm your friend. And on the count of 3, I want you to give me your name, okay? 1, 2, 3. Nice to meet you. Very, very nice to meet you. It's my understanding that the people in this room today are people of faith, correct? People who have a personal relationship with Christ. How many of you would be in the business community? Would you raise your hand if you're in the business community? Welcome. My gosh, good to see you. Great to have you. How many of you are in pastoring, bishoping, doing all that stuff in the church, okay? Okay, good. How many of you are neither one of those? You just saw there was food out here at the buffet line, and you wanted a free breakfast. Come on now, talk to me, huh? Okay, I'm going to be very open and vulnerable to you today. Okay. I think I can do this because I think that even though we don't know each other well, I think that we're friends. And I'm here to add value to Kenya and help you transform your country. How many of you would like to see Kenya transformed? I mean, that's where we are, correct? And sometimes I think it helps if you go behind the curtains and you kind of know why that's such a passion in my life. And so if you would allow me, I'm going to do something I haven't done at all here in Kenya. I've talked to a few groups, but I haven't in any way engaged in where I'm going to go in the first part of this talk today. But if it's okay, I think I'm going to go a little personal and just share with you why I am the person I am today, passionate about transformation for countries. Is that okay? Yes. So I won't bore you, but I just want to just talk to you about my journey. I started off as a pastor. For 25 years, that's what I did. Loved pastoring, thought I would do it all of my life. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. But in my first year as a pastor, I had a crisis. I think defining moments define us. And I can look at my life and I can look at my journey, and I haven't had a lot of defining moments. I could count them all on one hand, so I don't have hundreds of defining moments. But the few that I've had have beautifully changed my life. And when we think of transformation, transformation doesn't happen because of what you know. It's not like you lay out a blueprint for Kenya to be transformed, and we go from A to Z, and we've got this just incredible plan of which when we finish and connect all the dots and finish our assignment, we have transformed a country. In fact, in the countries that we work in, our theme of those countries is a very simple one, but it's a very powerful one. Transformation begins in me. I'm not talking about people outside of this room. I'm not talking about all those people out there in Kenya that need to be transformed. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about us, the people in this room. It begins in me. You cannot give what you do not have. And yet in my world, the church world, for so many years, we tried to do an awful lot of that. And to be authentic and to be transformational, it truly begins by the fact that I've been transformed. I've been changed. And when we talk about transformation for Kenya, I've got to talk about the changes that have happened in my life that have brought me to where I am, which makes me a passionate person to see the light come on for others. You know what? When somebody turns the light on for you, the rest of your life you want to go around turning lights on for people. Are you with me? It's kind of like, oh my, I didn't realize I could see all this. I didn't realize I could experience all this. And so it's kind of like I just try to go around turning on the light because I had the light turn on for me. But in my first year as a pastor, I went to a hospital to visit a man named Jim. And he wasn't a Christian. And we just connected very well. And so we had good conversations. And I truly spent for a couple of weeks. Back then, pastors went to the hospital a lot to visit people, and that's at least in America. I don't know what they do here in Kenya, but you go visit the people, and I would go see him every other day, every 3 days for sure. And for a couple of weeks, we just enjoyed. I kind of look forward to seeing Jim in the hospital and just talking to him. And in fact, I connected so well with him that I said, you know what? I think I've connected so well with him that when he gets out of the hospital, I think he'll come to my church. And I just kind of had that as my goal, and everything was going well until one day, I had a good conversation with Jim and went to make a couple of other calls. And when I got home that day, my wife said, Jim's sisters just called, and he suddenly died. And I said, you're kidding me. I probably a couple of hours ago, I was with Jim, and we just kind of had a good time and had a good conversation, and he's dead. So in tradition in our culture, back at that time when the body was ready to be viewed, whatever, the pastor go with the family and kind of view the body. And so I did that. And when I went to the funeral home in Rosemere Drapian in French Lick, Indiana, and I looked in this man's face in the casket, I realized something. This man was lost. And I was the last person to give him a chance to know Christ. And I failed. I didn't share my faith. There was no salt. There was no light. I was thinking about getting to church as if that's the goal in life, is to get everybody to come to church. And I thought, well, I'll just get him to come to church, and maybe someday, somewhere, someplace under the rainbow, he'll find God. I can remember I started to weep, and the sisters just thought I was the most compassionate person. They just loved on me, and they thought, boy, our pastor he's amazing, and he just is so compassionate. There was no compassion at all. For the first time in my life, I saw that my priorities in life were wrong, and that I was not a witness of who Jesus is and what Jesus can do. That I was pretty much just a pastor who kind of expected people to come to church to find God. The next 6 months of my pastoral life was totally miserable. And it was miserable because I was in conflict. I had priorities that needed to be adjusted. I had things I needed to rearrange, and God's Spirit kept working with me on the fact that when are you going to be salt and light? When are you going to be a positive witness for me? And I so desperately wanted to, but I so desperately had issues in my life that were priority out of whack, and so it took me a while. I wish it wouldn't have taken me 6 months, but it took me 6 months. But I can still remember the day I settled the issue, and I settled the issue very simply. I was a young pastor, and the church was growing, and I had great promise, and people kind of looked at me as one of the next pastoral stars. And I kind of had my focus there, and I was kind of charting my course and kind of planning my way, and all of a sudden, I realized that what I really needed to do is I just needed to fall in love with Jesus and fall in love with lost people and share my faith. And so I made a big request the day that I had my breakthrough. And the request was very simple. God, I said, I never have to be a pastor of a great church. I never have to be number one in the denomination. I don't have to be a bishop. I don't have to be any of that stuff. But I have to be a soul winner. I have to be that. I have to win people to Christ. And so I'm going to ask you for one thing in life and one thing only. And that is that you help me to have a heart for lost people, and that you give me wisdom and courage to begin to share my faith. And that prayer in that time was a life-changing, spirit-filled moment in my life where God granted me that request. And I say that to you because when I asked him to only, if he could only give me one thing in life, all I want to do is share my faith and be effective in winning people to Christ. When I prayed that prayer, he answered that prayer, and I've never asked him for anything else in my life from my own personal ministry. I've never asked him to be a great author. I've never didn't ask him to have a great church. I never ask anything except if you'll just help me get as many people ready for heaven as I possibly can. Now, I tell you that story in light of where we are in transformation, because I have another story, another defining moment. I made an intentional commitment to try to lead 200 people personally every year to Christ outside of the church. Now, I'm not talking about church stuff at all. You got to understand, this is one pastor that got over church real quickly in his life. Real quick. And I began to see what was really important. What would it profit any man to build a great church and not bring people to Jesus? So now I'm writing books and things are going well. And I'm making a commitment to try to share my faith and lead 200 people a year to Christ and that process. And by the way, that was a goal I had. That was a goal I had for many, many years. And as a pastor, I made that very public to my congregation. I said, outside the church, I want to share my faith and I want to bring people into the kingdom. And I said, I'm going to set a goal for 200 people this year. Outside church, I'm not talking about preaching. I'm not talking about all that pastoral stuff. I'm talking about you go connect with people that are lost and you become friends of theirs and you share your faith, and after a while they find Christ. And so I said my goal is to have 200. And I asked the church to pray for me. And by the way, I didn't want to tell my congregation this goal. I learned a long time ago that on the big things that God deals with you, the best way to go do those things is to make it public. I've found silent commitment doesn't last long. That you have to put a stake in the ground, and you have to say, okay, this is where I am, and this is where I'm going. And I can promise you, I didn't want to tell the congregation that because I knew they would be throughout the year not only praying for me, I love that, but I knew they'd be asking me how I was doing. And it was not the prayers that bothered me, it was the how are you doing that bothered me, because I thought if they ask me how I'm doing, I've got to be doing. That's the problem with how am I doing. How am I doing doesn't work because I have to do. And what we do is we like to talk about what we're going to do, but we don't want to do, which puts us in deep doo-doo. I'll never forget that first week. By the way, every week for several years, I consciously set up 10 appointments with people who did not know Christ to talk to them about faith. Every Sunday afternoon, I would make appointments for that week, and I wouldn't go home until I had my 10 appointments. And so that week, because I shared it with the congregation, I made probably 20 appointments. I just doubled down. You know what I mean? I want to start well, and it was the worst week of my entire life of ever sharing my faith. It was just pathetic. People weren't home. People had other things to do. People were saying no. I mean, it was just rejection. In fact, on Saturday night, I hadn't led anybody to Christ. And I've been at 6 days at it now, and Sunday's coming, and so I always made a habit to go to church just to pray on Saturday night, and so I went to church to pray, and I was kind of low, and when I walked into the lobby area, Larry and Patsy McDermott were there, and they looked at me, and they said, Pastor, we're so excited to see you. We've been praying all week for you to share your faith and lead people to Christ. How are you doing? And I looked at him and I said, well, I've done a lot of sharing, but haven't done very much reaping yet. But I said, the week's not over, is it? And something happened that changed my life. Listen to me carefully. I didn't go to the place in church where I prayed on Saturday night. I turned around and went right back out in the parking lot and got in my car. And I had one more person that I could go see that I tried a couple times and I kept missing him. Larry and Sharon Wilson. And I went over to their house that night and I led them to Christ. And that's the day I realized there's a time to pray and there's a time to share your faith. And we pray too much and share too little. I'm not being critical of prayer. Notice how Jesus did it. If you want passion and compassion, what did it do? Jesus went to the villages. Come on. And when he saw the multitudes, he felt compassion for them. And then he said, pray. See, we got it all turned around. We pray first. We need to go out and see lost people and get our heart broken. And the moment that our hearts are broken for people, we'll have compassion for them, and then our prayer life drastically changes. And so that put me on my journey. And that's my story as a pastor. And then I started writing books, and I came to my next defining moment as I'm writing books, basically trying to help pastors grow churches, because by the time I was 29, I had the 10th largest church in America. And so pastors were coming saying, how do you grow your church? And so I'm trying to help them and basically talk to them about sharing their faith. But I'm writing books on helping pastors, trying to help them. And I'm with my publisher, and my publisher says, John, we've done a survey on your books, and 2/3 of your books are being bought by the business community, the secular community. And I said, you're kidding me. Never even thought of them. Never even planned this. I said, you're kidding me. I said, you mean business people are buying my... Oh, they said they love your leadership stuff. They're grabbing hold of it. And even though it's Christian flavored, they're just getting it because you got these leadership principles and they're building companies off of it. And yes, your major target audience isn't the Christian audience, it's the business audience. And at that moment, I had a defining moment, and God called me to move over into the business community. And I was pastor of a large church, and it took me a couple years to make everything ready so the church could continue doing well while I made that transition. But I made the transition, and I said, okay, now I'm going to become salt and light, but I'm going to be specifically going into the secular world. I'm going into the business world. I'm going into the lost world. I'm going to quit preaching to the choir. And when that happened, God broke my heart again for lost people. Let me tell you something. When your heart is not broken for lost people, it's because you're not spending enough time with lost people. It's not healthy for Christians to be with Christians a lot. It's very unhealthy. You've got to understand, this is not heaven. I know it's close. It's Kenya. So I know it's heaven. You folks are going to want to come home on the weekends. But it isn't healthy. When we go to heaven, we get to spend the rest of our life with Christians. Are you okay? Let's not get too confused. While we're here, we're to fulfill the Great Commission. While we're here, we're to be salt and light. Now, I told you these two defining moments in my life because I have two gifts and I have two passions. Fortunately, my gifts and my passions match. I have the gift of evangelism. Without any question in my life, God has covered me and anointed me to share my faith, and wherever I share my faith, people receive Christ. So I have a gift of evangelism, but I also have a gift of leadership. And I love leadership, and a defining moment in my life was in 1973 when I came to the conclusion when pastors were asking me how to grow that church, is that everything rises and falls on leadership. Now listen to me carefully. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Every problem you have in Kenya is a leadership problem. Do you understand this? It's not a mass, all the people that are citizens of Kenya problem. It's a leadership problem. That's true in every fabric of society. Trust me, I've watched this, I've observed it, I've committed my life to leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And if it's a business company and they're having a lot of problems, can I tell you something? I can tell you what the problem with business is. You don't have good leadership. You get good leadership, you'll turn your business around. It's the law of the lid. Let me visually show you what I mean by this. If from a 1 to a 10, I'm an average leader, I'm a 5. If this is my leadership lid, this is how well John Maxwell leads. I'm an average leader, I'm not a 10, I'm not a 1, I'm just a 5. If that's my leadership lid, that's my ability, my skills, my giftedness, if this is my leadership lid, let me tell you something about your business right now. If you're a 5 as a leader, your business is a 4. That leadership lid will not allow your business to get any bigger. In the history of mankind, so it's not going to start here in Kenya. In the history of mankind, there is no case study where the leadership in government, business, church, or anything else was a 5, and the people kept growing, and the business just flourished, and it became a 10. It doesn't happen. That's the law of the lid. And when I began to realize that everything rises and falls on leadership, I became passionate to teach people how to lead, just like I became passionate to share my faith. Now you can see where the two of them are beginning to merge. I'm passionate about sharing my faith, and I'm passionate about helping people lead better, because when I'm doing Q&A in leadership, the number one question that people ask me, they'll raise their hand, they'll say, John, let me ask you a question. Are leaders born? Whenever they ask me that question, are leaders born, I give them the same answer. Of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader. And don't particularly want to either. Thank you very much. Now, what they're asking are not, are leaders born? What they're really asking are, there's some people, when they're born, they just kind of are natural leaders, so they go to the front of the line, and there are people that are born, they're not natural leaders, and they go to the back of the line. That's what they're asking. And when I wrote the book, Developing the Leader Within You, 25 years ago, it was a breakthrough book, leadership, that put me on the leadership map without any question, because it was the first book that said you can grow and develop yourself as a leader. That you don't have to be born to be a leader. That you can learn leadership principles, and you can begin to have leadership practices and develop leadership habits in your life until you can be very effective in leadership itself. So now all of a sudden you're seeing these two worlds of mine come together. A heart to reach people for Christ and evangelism, and a heart to teach people how to lead. Now I want you to take my story, if you would please, and let's place it to where we are today. Because we're talking about the potential of seeing Kenya transformed. And when I asked you a little bit ago, would you like to see your country transformed? I mean, everybody had their hand up. If you didn't have your hand up, I don't even have a clue why you're here. Everybody had their hand up, because everyone, your heart resonates. Yes, I want to see my country do better. I want to see a change. I mean, every one of you. Yes, some of you get both hands up. You don't want to get your feet up there. I mean, everybody. Is this not true? Look at your neighbor and say, I want to see Kenya transformed. Will you? Is that not your prayer? Is that not your heart? And by the way, if that's not the prayer of the Christian community, Kenya doesn't have any chance. This should be who we are. The DNA of every one of us in this room ought to be, I want to see my country changed in an incredible way. I want to see it transformed. Now that we have this heart's desire, what I want you to understand is this. Good intentions are not enough. And this is where we come in short. We have good intentions. We have desires. Boy, we say, I'd like to see my country transformed. Boy, you know what? I'd like to do something that would really help my country get transformed. And we're all filled with good intentions. And what I would like you to understand today is one of the worst things in life, listen to me carefully. My name is John. I'm your friend. One of the worst things in life is to be a person of good intentions that doesn't back it up with good actions. Good intentions are worthless. I watch people procrastinate all the time. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. I want to do that someday. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to do? Have you ever met people who are always getting ready to get ready? And every time you see it, oh my, yeah, well, yes, sure, yeah, let's do that sometime. You know what I've discovered? One of these days becomes none of these days. So now, let's get to where we need to go. Look at me. Everything worthwhile is uphill. Everything. Everything I know. You know, all of my dreams are uphill. All of my hopes are uphill. All of my desires, everything's uphill. Are you with me? If you've got a great relationship, it's all uphill. Everything worthwhile is uphill. Transformation, it's all uphill. And herein is the challenge. You cannot go uphill with good intentions. There's no such thing as accidental accomplishments. So if you ask everybody, do you want to reach your dreams? I want to reach my dreams too. Hey, do you want to get I want to get to the top. It has nothing to do with you and me getting to the top. Everything worthwhile is uphill. And the only way that we can go uphill is to be intentional. If you would sit down with me outside of sharing my faith, obviously, and you would say, John, what is the number one key to me being successful in life? I would say to you, you have to start now living an intentional life. And an intentional life is deliberate. You do it on purpose. There's nothing accidental about what I'm talking about now. It's a deliberate life. It's a life of choice. It's a life of consistency. Everything is worth uphill, and it's uphill. Let me tell you, it's uphill all the way. No one has ever coasted their way to success. If you and I are going to get there, we're going to have to be intentional in getting there. So let's all, you're just writing like crazy, and I love that. You're so receptive. You're so beautiful to teach, and I'm having the time of my life. But just put your pen aside for a moment, and just everybody do this, okay? Just everybody do this. Everybody do this. So talk to me. Everything worthwhile is what? Everything. Did I say some things? Most things? Few things? Everything. It's uphill. Part of the way? All the way. All the way. Look at your neighbor and say, everything worthwhile is uphill. Yeah, it's all uphill. There's no accident. Now. Have you got it? Okay, you got it. Now here's the problem. You can put your hands down for a moment. Here's the problem. And this is not an old man losing his balance. Although that's highly possible. So Catch me, please. Catch me. Listen to me carefully. Everything worthwhile is uphill. So we have uphill hopes, don't we? But we have downhill habits. And the number one downhill habit that keeps us from being successful is we live our life without intention. Most people don't lead their life, they accept their life. Everybody wants to talk about transformation. We want to pray about it. Christians are so good at prayer. You know, Christians love prayer as long as they don't have to do something. You weary me. You weary me so much. Truly, you weary me. Well, let's pray about that. Well, you know, let's pray about it. Well, you know what? Let's pray about that. You know, gosh, you know, I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray. Pray. Just do it. Just do it. Most of the things we pray about, we could do something about. But it's so much better and easier to pray about it. We just love to make God responsible for everything, don't we? Yeah, we do. We just love to. Oh God, you can do this, and God, you can do that, and oh man, I think sometimes you say, would you just shut up and go do it? And when we think of being intentional, I want us to be intentional in 4 areas. And I don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but I got enough time to talk about them that you'll get it and you'll have it. You're going to do fine. But there are 4 areas I want us to be as intentional. Number 1, I want you to be intentional in your personal growth. The only guarantee that tomorrow is going to get better is that you're growing today. I sometimes talk to people about their future, and they say to me, "Well, you know what? I hope. I hope. I hope. I hope. I think it's going to get better. I'm hoping. Hope's not a strategy, folks. There's nothing strategic about hope at all. You got to quit hoping for yourself, and you got to start helping yourself. And you start helping yourself by being intentional in your personal development and growth. Again, I had a catalytic defining moment when I had a mentor tell me, growth is not an accident. If you grow on purpose. You grow intentionally. Now let me say that there's a difference between getting older and getting better. You see, age, you don't have to be intentional in. You don't have to be intentional. You don't have to today say, boy, man, I just got to focus here. Woo! Man, I got to focus. I hope I can breathe another moment here. Let's just focus here. Focus, yeah. No, you know what, every day just clicks off and that calendar just keeps moving. And you don't have to be intentional at all, do you? Those days just keep coming, don't they? Huh? And you just, you're just getting older, and you're just getting older. You don't have to be intentional. You don't have to be intentional about death. You don't say, gosh, I got to die sometime. I got to sit down and figure this out. Wow, I got to read me a book on this. Wow. You just hang around long enough, and it happens. Are you with me? You don't have to. You see, you don't have to. But you see, you got to be intentional about getting better. I love these people who say, well, they're young, they'll mature. Can I tell you something? Age doesn't always accompany maturity. Sometimes age comes alone. Hello? You see, if you're going to grow, if you're going to grow, you got to be intentional about this. You got to have a plan for growth. You've got to ask yourself, what am I doing today that's helping me to get better than I was yesterday? You want to be intentional, and the reason for that is your growth determines how you grow, determines how everything grows around you. If you're not growing, people ask me all the time, I speak a lot for companies, and they'll sit there and they'll ask me in companies, well, how do we grow our company? It's very simple. Grow yourself. Guess what? When you get better, your company gets better. When you get better, your congregation gets better. When you get better, your family gets better. When you get better, everything gets better. But if you're not getting better, guess what? Nothing else gets better. So you want to be intentional in your growth. Secondly, you want to be intentional in your values. You have a values problem in Kenya. You know that, don't you? Hey, we have a huge values problem in America. We're all messed up. We've lost our way. And what we've learned about transformation is this. When you get people to learn and live good values, just good values, they become more valuable. They become more valuable. Hey, they increase their personal value. They increase their value to others. Everything gets better. Everything gets better when people just begin to live and learn good values. And so we teach those values. We teach them in small groups. We teach them in what we call round tables, where people sit around the table and they discuss these things, and it begins to become life-changing. So you want to be intentional in your values. You want to make sure that you're living that good life. You know, in Guatemala, where we've worked at that country now for 4.5 years, we have over 500,000 people in Guatemala now that are in values round tables. 500,000. It's changing the country. It's changing the country. You listen, change happens inside out. If you don't change the heart, you don't change the person. In the second largest bank in Guatemala, they have 14,000 employees. They all went through the round tables on values, and guess what? A year after everybody went through the values round table, their bottom line profit in Guatemala, in that second largest bank in the country, grew up to 78%. So that's huge. And they said, what happened? What happened is people quit stealing. And here's a real thought. They started working. Oh my gosh. They went to work on time. Oh, happy day. In fact, when I sit in with the business community, I just look at them and say, how many of you would like to have people when they come to work that work? What a thought that is. How many would you like to have people when they come to work, they don't steal from you? And they're honest. You see, once these values begin to penetrate business community, church community, education community, everything begins to change. But you got to be intentional. You're intentional about the values. And again, as Christians, oh my, shouldn't we be modeling this? You know, I'm going to have to stop here for a moment. That was a pretty pathetic response. When I asked you as Christians, should we be modeling this, I thought you'd come out of your seat. You just kind of sat there on me. Do we believe that a Christian ought to live a higher level of living? Or is that something you don't believe? Do we believe that a Christian ought to be honest? Yes. Not corrupt? Yes. Not deceitful? Yes. Person of truth? You have no chance of transforming the world if you and the church aren't transformed. People do what people see. When you've been changed, people around you will want to be changed. We want to be intentional in those values. Number 3, we want to be intentional not only in our values, in our growth, personal development. We want to be intentional in our leadership. We've already talked about everything rises and falls on leadership. So now we want to be intentional in adding value to people, because leadership is influence. How do you gain and discover influence in your life? You gain influence in your life, or you gain leadership in your life by becoming a person of influence. If you want, when I talk to young people, I share with them, you don't have to have a title or a position to be a leader. You just need to add value to people. And the moment you add value to people, you'll begin to grow in your influence with your peers. Just adding value to others. Because what leaders do is leaders lift people. Good leaders lift people. And I want to challenge you to take a 5-step process that I use every day in my life to add value to people. It's very simple, and every one of you can do it. The cookies are on the lower shelf. Everybody can have some. So as I give you these 5 things that I do every day to add value to people, look at your neighbor and say, even you can do this. You got it? Number 1, every day, I value people. It starts right there. Here's what I know about all of us. We won't add value to people that we don't value. Did you get that? The core of adding value to people is that you value people. And when you value them, you want to make a difference for them. You want to help them. You want to come alongside them. That's key. But if I don't value you, I won't want to add value to you. I won't go out of my way to make a difference in a positive way for you. It all begins with valuing people. People ask me, well, John, why are you at Kenya? Because I value you. See, I see you as a beautiful country, but I see you as a country that has much more potential than you're tapping right now. I don't think you're close to your potential. Do you? But I'm here because I value you. I'm not here because I needed a 23-hour plane trip. And I'm not here for money because nobody's paying me to be here. I'm paying my own expenses, so it's costing me to be here. You folks are expensive. Hey, but worth it. I'm not here because I need another place to talk. We are working with 3 countries on transformation now, and we have 22 presidents of countries that have asked us to come into their country. So we got plenty of places to go. So why am I here? Because I value you. And I not only value you, but I not only value who you are, I value your influence in Africa. See, I think the soul of Africa is Kenya. I think it's highly possible and probable that as Kenya goes, so goes Africa. You see, I'm not only talking about transformation of one country, I'm talking about if you can transform one country, you can transform another country, and you can transform another country, and you can transform a continent. And I know you say, John, you have very lofty goals. Isn't it nice to have lofty goals? It sure beats the ones that most people have. And you got to be intentional. And I value this. So adding value to people, it all starts with you value people. And what we all need to know is we need to value people that we don't like. We got to value people that are not like us. Of course, it's easy to value people you like. That's an IQ test. Oh, I like you. I value you. You're wonderful. How about the ones you don't like? What are you doing to make a positive difference in their life? What are you doing to add value to them? And by the way, you say, wow, that's kind of extreme. That's kind of Jesus. I love these people that want to be Christ-like. I can help you be Christ-like. Again, you start praying on me. I can help you be Jesus-like. When you follow the Gospels, and you come down at the end of reading those 4 great books, the thing you'll come away from every time is how much Jesus valued people. And the only people that had a hard time with Jesus valuing everybody was the religious people.